Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm talking today about Saturn and Venus in Aquarius, which will be happening from January 22nd until February 15th. That's quite a long transit. This very important shift that's happening, and as you can see, this is from an Instagram post that I wrote. This is on Instagram, but you could see that I wrote as a background. It says Saturn says to Venus, as you can see in this image, this is Venus, in case it's not obvious, and this is Saturn. And Saturn says, have fun, enjoy yourself, and save the world. The clock is ticking, and I'm waiting. Have fun, enjoy yourself is Venus, and save the world is Aquarius. And then Saturn is saying, the clock is ticking, and I'm waiting. Pop, pop, pop. So then to contextualize that more, it says, being real about others, worldly happiness, and our utopic visions are converging for a month or so. Elevate your desire for personal happiness towards something more universal, but never forget that your true nature is not found externally in another person or exalted worldly experience. It's not something you can or need to acquire or accomplish. Find the real beauty and truth within in the realm of silence and stillness, devotion and bliss, not attachment to others. So this is the kind of shadowy, wispy quality of Venus that we can get stuck in, because Venus is that sense of worldly happiness that is always there, tempting us to lose ourselves in the desires and the bliss of the world, and the especially to possess something of this world and think that we own it and it's mine, and in the worst sense, you're mine, you, and the happiness and pleasure that I want to get from you is now mine. I own the happiness and pleasure that I get from you. So do it, make me happy and give me pleasure, or else I'm going to be angry, sad, distraught, lost, because now I've lost my own connection to bliss and joy, which is fundamental to my essence. I've now lost that in you. And now I think that the only way I can be blissful and joyful and happy is if you do something to give it to me. This is the impoverished quality of Venus when we lose the connection to that bliss of our soul, that bliss of the soul, which again is yours. It's not just yours, it's you. It's your nature to be blissful. So anything that's not blissful and beautiful and joyful feels like a loss of self on that Venus level. So when Venus goes through Aquarius, we're actually looking for that bliss of the soul in something externally in the world, and more humanistic and more universalized than just our own experience. So in many ways, Venus in Aquarius is actually quite an elevated state because, for example, Venus has a very friendly relationship with Saturn, the ruler, because again, it universalizes and transcends the personal possessive quality. Now, it doesn't do it because it feels so good and happy to do that. No, Saturn's influence on Venus is to make that part of our nature more practical and more realistic. For example, it's better that we're realistic in our romantic relationships, because one of the biggest problems in romantic relationships is we're unrealistic about what the other person can give us and who the other person really is and who we are to them. Again, we don't like the unrealistic projections put onto us, but yet we project them onto others. We notice where others disappoint us. We seem to forget where we disappoint others as well. So Saturn makes that all very practical and actually brings Venus's energy out of that turned on, it's mine experience, and instead makes it more, again, realistic. It shatters the illusions of eternal happiness found in the external world. And Saturn, in breaking our will and shattering our external illusions reveal the inner potential. That's just Saturn's nature all the time. Venus and Mercury tend to do very well with that energy, better than others, because Venus and Mercury are already more aligned with things that are transactional. It's called Rajasic, where we're trying to give and take. So Venus understands that part. That part of you that understands this is Venus and also Mercury. For example, the sun part of you, the moon part of you, the Mars part of you, the Jupiter part of you, they have a much harder time dealing with and understanding that shattering of illusion. So when Venus is in Aquarius, it's already at this elevated state where we can experience that universality of our desires and our bliss. But then Saturn joins it now as well. Saturn is the ruler, so he's really bringing that lesson now. So it's not just the sort of cold reality or the harsh reality. It's actually a very empowered state. And, you know, by the way, in 2023, we have a lot of Venus energy, especially in the summer where Venus goes retrograde through the sign of Leo, join Mars and whatnot, where the lesson is going to be a bit harder. So 6 months from now, these lessons of Venus in Aquarius are going to be very important to you because, again, in about 6 months, Venus goes retrograde in Leo, and it's going to be a very different experience of Venus because Venus in Leo can be quite possessive, not in a nasty sense, but just very, very externally expressed and whatnot. 2023 in general has a lot of twists and turns ahead. Get the 2023 Vedic astrology forecast for your zodiac sign or for all 12 zodiac signs. In it, I analyze the 11 most important shifts we'll all be facing in 2023. I analyze these based on your sign, that would be your Vedic rising sign. In January, we have the big retrograde cycle of Mercury. Then in the middle of January, Saturn makes a huge shift into Aquarius for more than 2 years. Then, by the time we hit the spring, Jupiter moves into Aries, and we also have eclipses in Aries and a lot more, including Jupiter-Rahu conjunction. In the summer, Mars and Leo, along with Venus and Mercury retrograde cycles, show some major transformations for us all. At the end of the year, the lunar nodes change signs and we have eclipses and a lot more. So again, learn about what all of this means for you in 2023 or get all 12 forecasts so you can know what this means for your loved ones as well. So I thought I would just put that in there in case you haven't gotten the 2023 Vedic astrology forecast for yourself yet, or you could get all 12 for the people around you so you can also understand what they're going through. But I put that in there as well because, again, 6 months from now, Venus is going to go retrograde in Leo. Mars will also be there, and it's going to be a lot more, it'll be a lot easier to lose yourself in all these desires and projections and what I want, my happiness, my desires. I'm the queen. Why am I unhappy? Because people aren't worshiping me, right? And people are disappointing me and things like that. So this is a very important shift. And also, as is indicated now, we have this shift happening with Saturn also in Aquarius, which is another huge shift that just happened. Saturn moving into Aquarius happened January 17th. He's going to be there for 2.5 years or so. So again, we're now very much moving toward a more universalized expression of our level of commitment, the energy that we put forth toward, you know, being of service to others. And again, this is why you can even see why Venus really benefits when we have this idea of service, especially, again, the things that Venus really wants to bring to your life, to your external life, happiness, pleasure, joy, sharing that with another person. This is what Venus is in you, that accommodation, that's willing to compromise with others and to give others what they want so that you can get what you want. Again, because the Venus principle is really this understanding that, you know, I can make myself happy, especially on like a sensual level with things like food or sensual experiences. But that's just, you know, that's not really happiness. That's just pleasure. So Venus for myself is just some form of pleasure. But then I can share that pleasure and happiness with another person. And then it becomes not just that it makes me more, that it makes me happier, but then I share it with another person and it gets magnified. It's like 2x or maybe even 10x. It's like an exponential increase, because now not only is it some pleasure which just lasts, like if you're eating ice cream or something, it's pleasurable while you're eating it, then it's done. Then you even have to pay the price for it a little bit. We pay the price for our pleasure a little bit, because often the things that give us physical pleasure also physically deplete us. Now, the same thing can happen with emotional pleasure, which is what we would call happiness, is more of an emotional pleasure. Happiness is often shared with other people. And again, this brings in what's called the Rajasic guna. And that can also deplete our energy if the things that are making us happy aren't really connected to the heart, right? And in fact, if they're just more giving us pleasure, not happiness, then they're also going to be depleting. But if they're truly connected to something that is truly making us happy, like sharing with another person in an authentic way where we don't feel like we're being abused, or that we're abusing others, or that we're asking more than we're giving, or we're giving more than we're taking, or whatever it might be, that variable is off, then happiness can also very much replenish us emotionally. Think of when you start relationships, when you fall in love, or you start a relationship at first. You're so hopeful and you feel replenished. In fact, you don't even feel like you need to eat very much. Think about even just when life is making you happy, right? The French have a saying that's living on love and water, living on l'amour des fraises, which is like love and water. Like, so when you're in love, it's like you just live on love and water. Like you don't even feel like you need food. Now, it doesn't have to be like that just with a person, but it can be like that with life. Again, the more content you are and the more fulfilled you are and having a loving relationship with life, then you don't feel like you need to eat as much food or whatever, because a lot of eating food is just getting pleasure from it. We're not eating because it's the best thing for our body. We're doing it because we want to taste that thing and enjoy that and derive pleasure from it. But the pleasure doesn't really lead to happiness. But then there's the next level, which is beyond even just a happy life. It's a blissful life where we now connect not just with another person, but with God, whatever you call God. But in the Indian sense, in the Eastern sense, it's that bliss of the soul that's found in nature, in any kind of religion, in that devotion to beauty itself, that everything has beauty, that beauty and bliss and joy are parts of your nature. And when you seek them externally, like in the ways I just said, they're usually going to be depleting, almost certainly on some level. When they come from the inside, they're not depleting, they're replenishing, they're rejuvenating. And in many ways, how we deal with Venus energy shows how much energy, rejuvenation, or depletion we have in our life. And in Vedic astrology especially, Venus is really the energy that takes life away in many ways. There are two houses in astrology, what are called Marika houses, which are killer houses, death houses. It's the second house and the seventh house. You might say, well, that's really weird, because the second house is like food, diet, maybe things like family, values, but it's also literally what goes into your mouth, and especially your diet and your food and what you consume, and wanting to eat in a way that gives you pleasure and happiness or vitality. And of course, seventh house is the house of sex. It's literally sexual desire, the sexual expression. It's not the eighth house, which is what's actually Western astrology now, calls the eighth house sex. It's not. Eighth house is the vulnerability that comes when you have an intimate involvement. In the seventh house is intimate engagements, which includes sexuality, but any kind of intimate agreement is the seventh house. And so our energy goes out through the mouth and through the genitals. Mouth is the second house, genitals is the seventh house. And these are both Venus things. So it's said to be, these are said to be depleting areas of life. Again, they're only depleting through the ego if they're shrouded in ignorance. So as much as Venus can regenerate and replenish, it can also deplete, and it's usually depleting. It's what makes life energy leave and be depleted. And this is why, for example, brahmacharya, which is celibacy, is one of the tenets of being a monk or a yogi, or to hold the sperm, or shukra, which is literally the name of Venus, is shukra. So again, if you think I'm just off on a tangent, the Sanskrit name for Venus is shukra, which is sperm in Western parlance. But instead of it becoming, ejected externally in the form of sperm, it becomes sublimated and internalized and forms what's called ojas. Ojas is the power to transform the sexual expression and the desire for pleasure externally, internally into the heart, where it becomes devotion. And again, ojas is the master essence of kapha, which is the deranged Ayurvedic element of water. When ojas, or that love, devotion, and the power to contain the life within our heart, when that becomes compromised, it becomes what's called kapha energy. So kapha is an Ayurvedic dosha, or derangement of ojas, which is the principle of water, the principle of love, devotion, and literally Venus. Venus is, her name in Sanskrit is shukra, which is literally sperm. Again, in a man, it's easy to see because sperm flies out. But in a woman, it's different because it's not the sperm flying out from the genitalia. It's the longing for the connection and all of the energy that goes into, like, oh, the romantic, one day I'll have the thing, which is much more of the female's expression of how the ojas might leave. And instead of being that naturally devoted, it's more emotional, which is also the stressed out longing for connection to external pleasure and happiness, rather than staying with the internal connection to the heart and our deeper devotion. So Saturn moving through, Venus moving through Aquarius. Again, one more time, we'll look at this graphic. Have fun, enjoy yourself, and save the world. The clock is ticking and I'm waiting. So it's not meant to be scary or ominous, just to say, don't forget what's really going on. Don't forget that true nature. Being real about others, worldly happiness, our utopic visions are converging for a month or so. Being real about others, worldly happiness, and our utopic visions of even wanting to save the world and whatnot are converging. Elevate your desire for personal happiness towards something more universal, but never forget that your true nature is not found externally in another person or exalted worldly experience, which is what we can look for in Aquarius. Oh, I'm going to save the world. Oh, I'm aligned with all people in the world. That's elevated beyond just the personal, but it's still, in fact, often very ambitious. And again, it's not something you need to acquire or accomplish. Again, the Saturn influence on Venus is like, instead of it being so personal, it's more transpersonal and universal, but also creates stress to achieve, to accomplish, to be ambitious. Yes, it's not just about my personal relationships, it's my relationship with the world. And often what can happen when Venus is in Aquarius is we have a hard time just being satisfied with another person, because they don't satisfy the big ambition of just, wanting to, again, sort of save the world or something. It's this higher ambition, which is less personal, but it's also harder to satisfy because of the pressure of Saturn. So find the real beauty and truth within in the realm of silence and stillness. That's the nature of Saturn. The silence and stillness, again, it's not meant to be scary. It's just a quality of Saturn which understands the nature of the world, understands that externally the clock is ticking and there's just, atrophy, I guess you would call, or is it entropy? One of those where We're just getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And Saturn realizes that and says, okay, stop looking outside and look inside. So I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, please share it with others. Please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube to get notified of new videos and live streams. Also, leave a comment, share it with others on Facebook, Twitter, or other social media platforms. For a limited time, I'm offering 10 hours of masterclasses, Yoga and Vedic Astrology, Quantum Vedic Astrology, and Spiritual Astrology Masterclass. These are 3 great courses that will really help you a lot. Now, in case you don't know who I am, I taught the Astroved certification course, Dattatreya Shiva Baba, in 2010. Ravi Shankar published my book in 2018. I've been around for decades. I've been teaching these great classes, and if you go to VedicAstrologyEssentials.com, you can get this 90% off discount of these 3 great classes, more than 10 hours, guaranteed value. You can check this out. These 3 classes will give you all the necessary tools to begin to learn Vedic astrology. Please find me on YouTube at Sam Jeppy, Vedic Astrology Teacher. On there since 2007, thousands of hours of classes. Also on Facebook at Astrology Teacher, tons of articles updated regularly, and I'm on Instagram at Vedic Astrology 108, ongoing updates and interaction.